Finally, tonight, Julie Anders and Dick Van Dyke talk about the secrets of Mary Poppins in their own words, as we celebrate the 60th anniversary of a Disney classic. You may think you know everything about Mary Poppins, the songs, the characters, and the unforgettable magic, but the story behind the scenes was not at all what it seemed like. Now, almost 60 years later, Van Dyke is talking about the drama that surrounded the set, the tension with the stars, and the shocking sacrifices he made to bring the magic to life. What he says will shock even you. Dick Van Dyke was born in West Plains, Missouri on December 13, 1925. For many years, Van Dyke thought he was born in 1926, but when he was 18, he found out that his parents had lied about his birth year to hide the fact that he was born before they got married, which was a scandalous fact in the 1920s. This revelation changed him forever. His family then moved to Danville, Illinois, where Van Dyke spent most of his childhood. It was a small town, but interestingly, Danville High School became a breeding ground for future stars. Notable students who went there include Donald O'Connor, who went on to star in Singing in the Rain, and Bobby Short, a jazz legend. Even stranger, one of his close friends was Gene Hackman's cousin. At the time, Van Dyke wasn't interested in show business. He was very religious and even thought about becoming a Presbyterian minister. He taught Sunday school and was a deacon at his church. But everything changed when he joined the high school drama club. Van Dyke felt called to serve in 1944, so he dropped out of high school to join the U.S. Army Air Forces. However, at 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighing only 135 pounds, he was turned down several times because he was too thin. Determined to join, he famously stuffed himself with bananas and water before his third try, just barely meeting the 141B requirement. Once accepted, his military career took an unexpected turn. He was first trained as a radio announcer, but he narrowly missed. Instead of being assigned as a tail gunner, which had one of the highest death rates, Van Dyke showed off his ability to entertain by singing and dancing during a talent show. This got him a spot in the Special Services, where he performed for troops instead of going into combat, which made him even better as a performer. After the war, Van Dyke's career in entertainment began. He started as a radio DJ at WD in Danville, where he developed his smooth voice and quick wit. But it was his partnership with his work with Phil Erickson, as part of the comedy duo, Eric and Van the Merry Mutees, that really got his career going. They did mime and lip-syncing acts to records and toured nightclubs on the West Coast, and later hosted a local TV show in Atlanta. The success of the act taught Van Dyke important skills in physical comedy and timing that would become his trademarks. Van Dyke's natural talent quickly caught the attention of TV viewers. In 1954, he appeared on the talent show Chance of a Lifetime. He started hosting CBS's The Morning Show and was a panelist on To Tell the Truth. These early roles gave him a chance to connect with viewers and show off the charm and humor that would define his career. Dick Van Dyke's rise to fame began with an unexpected break on September 5, 1954, when he appeared on the talent show Chance of a Lifetime. At the time, he was transitioning from radio and nightclub acts to television. What many people don't know is that Van Dyke, he almost missed this chance, because right before he had to perform, he had stage fright and hid in a bathroom stall. A fellow contestant and a quick swig from a flask got him back on track. Once he was on stage, Van Dyke did a skit in which a microphone cord got tangled around him while he tried to sing. The audience loved his mix of physical comedy and charm, and the performance caught the attention of people in the entertainment business. His success on the show led to guest spots on Popular. He started his TV career with The Chance of a Lifetime and got an exciting offer when he became the host of CBS's The Morning Show in 1955. The offer came from Byron Paul, a director at CBS, who had met Van Dyke while they were both in the Air Force. Live TV was still new, and hosting was hard. On his third day as host, Van Dyke tripped over a cable during a live broadcast, hitting the studio lights around him. Instead of freaking out, he turned the accident into an improvised comedy routine that made everyone laugh, even people watching at home. This showed how well Van Dyke could stay calm under pressure and turn mistakes into comedic gold. His sense of humor also served him well on game shows, where he was a panelist on To Tell the Truth, charming viewers with his quick wit. However, his success on the show wasn't without drama. In 1957, he correctly identified a cont. CBS had to make a public statement defending Van Dyke and the show after he was accused of pretending to be a CIA agent. Despite this, his charm and likability made him a TV favorite. Van Dyke's move from hosting to acting began with a guest appearance on Phil Silver's show in 1957, where he played a soldier caught up in one of Sergeant Below's schemes. Van Dyke was nervous about working with the legendary Phil Silvers, who was known for his sharp humor, surprised Van Dyke by being kind. Silvers gave Van Dyke advice that made him feel better about himself and helped him give a great performance. This taught Van Dyke important lessons about timing and delivery that would shape his comedic style. In 1959, Van Dyke made his Broadway debut in The Girls Against the Boys. The show closed after only 16 performances, but it was a turning point in his career because it was there that he caught the attention of famous choreographer Gower Champion, who later cast him in that role in Bye Birdie was Van Dyke's big break, putting him in the spotlight and setting the stage for his future success. From his nerve-wracking debut on Chance of a Lifetime to his outstanding performance on The Phil Silver Show, every step of Van Dyke's journey showed how strong and versatile he was. He turned setbacks into opportunities, whether it was by improvising after a live accident or getting over his fears of performing with famous people. Lucky for him, he was in a short-lived show in 1959 called The Girls Against the Boys, which closed after only 16 performances. This experience led him to audition for a part in Bye Bye Birdie, a musical that would change his life forever. Van Dyke tried out for a small part in the show, but his performance caught the attention of legendary choreographer Gower Champion. After singing his audition piece, he nervously broke into an impromptu soft shoe dance, even though he had never taken dance classes. Champion was impressed by Van Dyke's charm and energy, and offered him the lead role of Albert Peterson on the spot. Van Dyke was shocked and said he couldn't dance, but Champion told him, "We'll teach you." This moment of faith would be important for both the actor and the production. When Bye Bye Birdie opened on Broadway on April 14, 1960, at the Martin Beck Theater, it was an instant hit. It was based on the true story of Elvis Presley's draft into the Army. Van Dyke's performance as the clumsy but likable Albert Peterson made the show both funny and touching. His comedic timing and ability to bring emotional depth to the role won over both audiences and critics, turning what could have been a simple character into something memorable. Van Dyke's big break came when he won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a musical just a year after making his Broadway debut that same night. The musical Bye Bye Birdie won 4 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, making it a Broadway hit and bringing Van Dyke to the attention of Hollywood. In 1963, Columbia Pictures turned Bye Bye Bird into a movie, with Van Dyke reprising his role as Albert Peterson. However, the change from stage to screen wasn't easy. The movie shifted its focus to Kim McAfee, played by Margaret, to appeal to a younger audience, putting Van Dyke's role in the background. Champion was impressed by Van Dyke's charm and energy, and offered him the lead role of Albert Peterson on the spot. Van Dyke was shocked and said he couldn't dance, but Champion told him, "We'll teach you." This moment of faith would be important for both the actor and the production. When Bye Bye Birdie opened on Broadway on April 14, 1960, at the Martin Beck Theater, it was an instant hit. It was based on the true story of Elvis Presley's draft into the Army. Van Dyke's performance as the clumsy but likable Albert Peterson made the show both funny and touching. His comedic timing and ability to bring emotional depth to the role won over both audiences and critics, turning what could have been a simple character into something memorable. Van Dyke's big break came when he won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a musical just a year after making his Broadway debut that same night. The musical Bye Bye Birdie won 4 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, making it a Broadway hit and bringing Van Dyke to the attention of Hollywood. In 1963, Columbia Pictures turned Bye Bye Bird into a movie, with Van Dyke reprising his role as Albert Peterson. However, the change from stage to screen wasn't easy. The movie shifted its focus to Kim McAfee, played by Margaret, to appeal to a younger audience, putting Van Dyke's role in the background. Van Dyke was upset that the story had lost some of its heart, but his performance in the movie was praised by critics, who said he had more natural talent than his TV roles suggested. The movie also did very well at the box office, making over $13 million, and introducing Bye Bye Birdie to an even wider audience. This was a huge turning point in Van Dyke's career. In just 3 years, he went from being unknown to becoming one of the biggest names in the business. The story of how the Dick Van Dyke Show came to be is one of chance and reinvention. It all started with Carl Reiner, who based his own experiences as a comedy writer on his own creation of a pilot called Head of the Family in 1960. Reiner not only wrote the show, but also starred in it, but the network turned it down because they thought it didn't quite work. That's when producer Sheldon Leonard came in with the bold idea of getting a better actor to play the lead role. We completely rethought the show and started looking for a new lead. At the time, Dick Van Dyke wasn't very well known in Hollywood, but he was starring in the Broadway musical Bye Birdie when Reiner went to see him perform. Reiner was immediately struck by Van Dyke's physical comedy skills and perfect timing, and he knew he had found the right person to bring Rob Petrie to life. Naming the show after Van Dyke wasn't about star power, it was just a practical choice, as Van Dyke later joked. Everyone knew who Dick Van Dyke was, they just needed a name for the show. Carl Reiner and Dick Van Dyke worked together, and it was magic. Reiner's sharp, witty scripts went perfectly with Van Dyke's vaudevillian charm and everyman appeal. Together, they made a character that was both lovable and relatable. Van Dyke's natural chemistry with co-stars Rosemarie and Maury Amsterdam added another layer of brilliance. Van and Dyke credited them with setting the rhythm of the comedy, saying, "You just wrote on top of that." The show's innovative approach made it stand out from other sitcoms at the time. It was one of the first to combine workplace comedy with family life. This dual focus created a lot of different storylines and deeper character development. And it also broke away from the tired trope of the bumbling husband and smart wife. Rob and Laura Petrie were equals in their marriage. There were funny mistakes and touching moments in their relationship, which really hit home with viewers. The Dick Van Show also pushed the limits of what was possible with storytelling. Episodes often used flashbacks and dream sequences, which were not common in sitcoms at the time. One memorable episode, The Night the Roof Fell In, even had a talking fish telling the story, which showed how willing the show was to try new things and take risks. The now iconic opening scene, where Rob Petrie trips over in the ottoman, was a last-minute idea that was shot in just a few minutes. It became a trademark of the show, with viewers eagerly anticipating whether Rob would trip or avoid the ottoman in each episode. Despite its eventual success, the show struggled in its first season and came dangerously close to being canceled. But by its second season, it had gained a loyal audience and critical acclaim. Over the course of its 5-year run, it won 15 Emmy Awards, including 3 for Outstanding Comedy Series. It had a huge impact on how TV writers today. Render's method of asking his team what happened at your house this week encouraged writers to use real-life events as inspiration, which became common in sitcoms. The Dick Van Dyke Show left an indelible mark on the world. It launched the careers of both Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore, who went on to become TV icons in their own right. The show's sophisticated writing, timeless humor, and groundbreaking portrayal of marriage and family life are still praised decades later. It remains a model for sitcoms, and its influence can be felt in every part of the genre. The Writers Guild of America ranked it number 14 on their list of the 101 best-written TV shows of all time in 2013. This solidified its place as one of television's greatest achievements. Dick Van Dyke's journey in Mary Poppins is full of passion, humor, and a surprising amount of struggle, both on and off screen. He was cast as Bert, the happy chimney sweep, without much trouble, but he had to work harder to get the part of Mr. Dawes Sr., the elderly bank director. He was so determined to play the part that he offered to do it for free, but Walt Disney wasn't sure at first and had to be persuaded. Van Dyke did his own makeup and a screen test, which Disney thought was good enough that he gave him the part. But there was a catch. Disney wanted Van Dyke to donate $4,000 to the New California Institute of the Arts. When he thought about this, Van Dyke joked, "I paid him to let me do the part I offered to do for free. I'm still scratching my head over that." Despite the cost, he thought it was worth every penny, and said he would have. Even though Van Dyke's performance as Bert became famous, his Cockney accent became notorious. Even Van Dyke himself has admitted it was terrible, partly because his dialect coach, J. Pat O'Malley, was Irish and not very good at a Cockney accent. The result was a mess of sounds that made his attempt sound more like a caricature than a real one. His accent was so bad that it came in second place in a poll of the worst accents in movie history. Van Dyke has kept a good sense of humor about it, even mentioning how during his cameo in Mary Poppins Returns as Mr. Dose Jr., He worked closely with a language coach to make sure he didn't make the same mistake again. They won't laugh at me this time on set. Van Dijk and Julie Andrews had a mutual respect for each other. Even though their experiences were different, Andrews was calm and confident because she was already a star, while Van Dijk felt out of his depth, especially during the musical recordings, where he struggled to match Andrews's vocal precision, saying that her soprano voice was slightly sharp. He joked that because his body was naturally flat, it was like trying to climb a mountain. But he thanked Andrews for being patient and supportive while they worked on the movie. New special effects, like dancing with animated penguins, added another level of difficulty. Timing and accuracy were very important, as animators often showed him how to match his movements to their planned scenes behind the scenes. The adaptation was criticized by P.L. Travers, the author of the Mary Poppins books. Travers was known to dislike Disney's versions of the books. Travers openly expressed her dislike for Disney's version of her work, especially the softer portrayal of Mary Poppins, whom she had imagined as strict and in charge. She was said to hate both Dyke and Andrews. Her dissatisfaction reached a peak at the film's premiere, where a rumor spread that Travers was crying not from happiness, but sadness. She demanded that the animation sequence be taken out, and Disney told Pamela, "Ship has sailed." Travers's reaction showed how her vision was at odds with Disney's. Even though these problems were happening, Van Dijk was quietly dealing with his own problems during filming. He struggled with alcoholism, which he used to deal with his shyness. He said that drinking made him feel more social and at ease, but it had a cost. Later, he admitted that his heavy reliance on alcohol caused him to experience depression and moments of despair. He said, "I was in deep trouble," admitting that he had even had suicidal thoughts. Despite these problems, his professionalism on set never wavered, his energy and charm. At 98 years old, Dick Van Dijk is still a beloved icon, proving that his charm and talent are truly timeless. He continues to captivate fans of all generations. In an interview in December 2023, he revealed something surprising. He's getting more fan mail now than during his peak years. What makes this even more special is that a lot of it comes from kids who love his family classics, like Mary. "I'm getting letters from little kids saying they watch the movies over and over again." This new wave of praise shows how his work still speaks to people, decades after it was first released. Van Dijk hasn't slowed down in his career, making history twice in 2024. First, he became the oldest actor to win a Daytime Emmy for his guest role on Days of Our Lives. This win came an amazing 60 years after his first Emmy, which was for the Dick Van Dijk Show. Later that same year, he tied the record for the oldest actor to win an Emmy for his work on Days of Our Lives. Winners for his primetime Emmy-winning variety show, Dick Van Dijk, 98 Years of Magic. These accomplishments show not only his lasting talent, but also his unique ability to adapt and stay relevant. However, his recent public appearances have caused concern among fans. In September 2024, Van Dijk canceled his planned appearance at the Fank Salt Lake Comic Convention, saying that traveling and interacting with large crowds was too much for him to handle at almost 99 years old. Around the same time, he also missed the 2024 Emmy Awards. Many fans were worried when he wasn't around, but Van Dijk kept his sense of humor. When he was seen in Malibu soon after, he joked, "I feel old," and added that he hoped to make it to his 99th birthday in December. His strength and optimism continue to win people over. When he thinks back on his amazing career, Van Dijk remains humble and thankful. In a June 2012 interview, he said, "To this day, I look back and I'm just amazed what. Even with all of his success," he said, "I just want to be remembered for making people laugh for 75 years. This sentiment perfectly captures his lifelong commitment to spreading joy. One of Van Dijk's most cherished projects remains Mary Poppins. In an interview in November 2024, he talked about how deeply the Sherman Brothers' music moved him when he first heard it. "I couldn't believe it." His emotional connection to the movie is just as strong now as it was when it was being filmed. He also talked about how hard it was to work with Julie Andrews, who he admired a lot. "She is a soprano, but she sang just a hair on top of the note," he said. "I sang flat, so it was hard to match her, but she was patient and professional." These stories show both his struggles and his deep respect for his co-star in a rare moment of. In an interview in December 2023, Van Dijk said, "I'm pretty lazy really when I'm having fun, all right, but I'm a lazy person. I don't have a lot of drive. I've been very lucky." This surprising statement stands in contrast to his long and successful career, suggesting that his love of performing was driven more by joy than ambition.